I think live or close to being live on YouTube. And I'm gonna go ahead and
Okay.
start live on Instagram.
Okay. Let's see.
Hi, YouTube. Okay.
Let's see. You should be on the Sickle Cell 101. Let me try that.
Okay, I'm live. I'm just now going live on Instagram.
Oh, okay, okay.
Sorry if you didn't see me. Hi, hello.
Let's see.
Happy Friday, guys.
Yeah, happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Hope you guys are doing all right. Welcome in. Hi, Just P. Marie. Hello, covered by him. Hi, King Jaden. Hi, Miss Ray. Hey, Tristan Knight. You guys have some nice usernames. They flow off the tongue. Hello, hello. Welcome in. We are waiting for Dr. Q. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. If you don't have any questions, you want to just shout out where you're from, go ahead and put it in the chat as well. I'll call out some cities. I'm
I
sure some
don't
of them will be cities that I want to visit.
I don't see you on Sickle Cell 101
Oh,
on
did you refresh?
Instagram.
You refreshed your feed?
Oh, you're reminding
Hi,
me.
Grace gives
Yes.
hope.
I always forget to refresh.
Hopefully it pops up.
So,
Tristan, you're from Arlington, Virginia. I've been there.
okay, I'm on Instagram with you.
Okay, we have Dr.
Send me
Q.
an invite.
Ooh, we have Inglewood. So you're a fellow Californian. We're in the Bay
Yep.
though.
And New York.
From New York. I love New York. Okay, I just sent you an invite, Dr. Q. Houston, Texas.
Okay.
I've been to Houston. Y'all, your summers are hot over there. Like, I don't know how
Hello,
y'all doing
everybody.
it. We have Dr. Q. Who is the girl that's viral? It says, I don't know if y'all talked about this, but I want to know your opinion on the girl that's viral. Who's the girl that's viral? What am I missing? Ah, Grace is from Uganda.
Oh, yeah. Germany,
Raji, you're
Houston.
from India. There's a
Wow.
sickle cell conference in India in October that I'm hoping to go to. It's in Hyderabad, India. So if you're near there, we have Canada, we have Germany. Hallo, wie geht es dir? Meine Vati ist vom Ostdeutschland, Jena. And obviously my German isn't that great. Okay. Oh, congratulations, your son started gene
Yeah.
therapy. That's awesome. That's great. And you're a September Libra too? Is your birthday 9/25? My birthday's 9/30, September 30th. We're a special type of Libra. King Jaden's from Ninja. Go Ninja. I can okay. And then Cincinnati. Y'all go ahead and post questions. And if you all want to, there's a person that says something about a girl going viral. Please do share and we can talk about it. I can start us off with our question that was sent in. Oh, we got Kenya in the house. The question was, is fertility difficult in women with sickle cell?
It is for males more than females. So you're not, people with sickle cell disease are not infertile, but males have decreased sperm counts relative to people who don't have sickle cell. That just means probably nothing really. It's not that low. So you're still fertile. Um, Women do go into menopause early. So 35, something like that. Most people are 40 or over if you don't have sickle cell disease. So, um, that's an issue. The sperm count in males and early menopause in females are the two major uh, differences in fertility. Um, if you're taking hydroxyurea, it further decreases your sperm count in men, but you're still not infertile. And in women who take hydroxyurea, it does not affect your fertility. Women are born with all the ovum that they're going to have for the rest of their life, and they're not um, regenerating like sperm is actively regenerating, and so hydroxyurea affects that, does not affect the ovaries. The other thing is that there was a study called the escort study, and that showed that women who took hydroxyurea, um, some a couple took it all the way through their pregnancy because they had such severe sickle cell disease. The details weren't in the paper, but they couldn't be transfused. So they took hydroxyurea during their entire pregnancy, and none of the children or the infants in any woman who took hydroxyurea had any problems. So at the doses that are given for sickle cell disease, it does not look like it's a teratogen. In animal studies where they gave really high doses of hydroxyurea, it was a teratogen, meaning it caused birth defects, but not in humans at the doses for sickle cell.
Okay, so um and then we did learn on our World Sickle Cell Day Ask the Experts Marathon that sickle cell does impact, it impacts your whole body, right? And so that does include your reproductive organs. And so even if you're not on hydroxyurea, your reproductive organs can be impacted by sickle cell because it's a blood disorder. And
Right.
yeah.
And that's why men with sickle cell have a lower sperm count than uh, other people.
So the follow-up question is there any solution to this issue in trying to have kids? And just because you take hydroxyurea, if you're a man, doesn't mean you're infertile. You can still, well, it's not recommended that you be on hydroxyurea when you try to have kids first and foremost. But so hydroxyurea may lower your sperm count, but there is still a possibility that you can get pregnant.
Right.
Um, so it's not necessarily an issue because you can still get pregnant, but you just have to keep in mind it's not recommended to get pregnant while you're on hydroxyurea.
In Europe, they actually collect sperm and store it for people who are in sickle cell with hydroxyurea. There are reports of people who took it. The report doesn't, well, I don't remember. It could be there, how long the men had been on hydroxyurea, but it is reported that sometimes your sperm count goes down for as long as a year. So
After
after
stopping it,
taking, yeah. So it's the details in that weren't obvious, but it can be a short time or a really prolonged time. In the United States, it's not routine to collect sperm and save it, or ovum or whatever. Unlike if you get gene therapy or a bone marrow transplant, following that you can be sterile. So in those cases, it's you should, if it's, it's not always covered by insurance, but you should preserve your fertility by um, having a sperm collection, or you can even uh, collect uh, the ovum, which is a much, much bigger deal than the sperm
Yeah.
collection.
I see a comment here. I hope all men and women having sickle cell disease give birth to healthy babies. That is amazing to say. And I do have a child. I have an 11-year-old, and I was on hydroxyurea at some point and then stopped taking hydroxyurea. And my daughter came out healthy. So it is possible. Um, just so you all are aware. I do want the next question. You touched on this, Dr. Q, a little bit. And this is a nice segue to the next question. What is it about gene therapy that causes sterility?
It's the conditioning. So gene
It's that
therapy,
chemotherapy, right?
yeah. So it's busulfan. So um, in order to facilitate, so the way gene therapy works is you have something called apheresis. They collect the progenitor cells. Those progenitor cells go to a laboratory, and then they modify those. And then that collection, once it's been modified, and they actually check to make sure that there's enough progenitor cells in that sample to reconstitute your bone marrow. Then prior to getting your own cells reinfused, they give you a chemotherapy they call it making space for the transplant. And so that is what causes sterility. Um, it's a chemotherapy that clears out your bone marrow pretty much, but other cells in your body that are rapidly dividing also get affected by this. And sperm is one thing that does, and it can also cause infertility in women. So that's an issue with uh, gene therapy or bone marrow transplant. So if you're going to have either of those therapies, you should talk to the transplanter and find out how you could preserve your fertility. And in Europe, with hydroxyurea, for whatever reason they do that, they report that men have, using their preserved sperm, have had children with women. So in Europe, that's a whole different. I don't there's I don't really quite understand why there's such a disparity between the United States and Europe, but that's people think differently. People in medicine, it's there's some consensus on everything, but there's a lot of gray areas where people aren't always on the same page.
Yeah. And then segueing into something else that's related, this person says chemotherapy is so hard with gene therapy. Do you feel there will ever be a better way?
Yes, definitely. So um, there are always, you know, science advances, which is why it's important for the government to fund science, because things change over time. And I think in the future, you may get like an infusion of a of a medication that actually goes into your bone marrow and changes your progenitor cells without chemotherapy. That's not happening yet, but when I was in training and when I was a pediatrician, gene therapy was kind of like, something that was going to happen far in the future. And here we are, and we're in an age where gene therapy is available. Different types of gene therapy are available for everyone. And what I used to tell my patients before gene therapy was that, in a young kid, that you should be taking hydroxyurea or some kind of therapy. And at that time there was more than one, but now there's just hydroxyurea, because you want to preserve your body for something that happens in the future. If you don't take hydroxyurea or some kind of medication, hydroxyurea is what you know most people take to preserve your function. If you're 10 years from now they develop something, you may not qualify because you have too many complications or problems with your sickle cell. The other thing is, if you have like AVN or you have other complications of sickle cell, gene therapy does not fix that. So what you have going on when you go into gene therapy or a transplant is that's the way it's going to be. So if you have AVN, if you have heart disease, other problems, relative to sickle cell lung problems, those aren't going to they can get fixed a little bit, but they don't go back to normal with gene therapy or with a transplant. So it's really important to take really good care of your health in order to take advantage of these things that are coming down the pipeline that are going to change people's lives dramatically.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I can't, you know, I, it's just, I guess I'm getting old, but it's really amazing that they have gene therapy now. When I was started out, that was not, it was kind of like something that was going to happen 100 years from now or
From
something.
now, but
But
it's here.
yeah, here it is, and I'm
Oh,
still alive.
I want to ask the audience, would you guys consider getting gene therapy? I've been back and forth with thinking about that. Not anything too serious, but kind of trying to imagine a life where, am able to utilize a successful gene therapy and how different things would be. So, would you all consider gene therapy, or it is still new? So, a lot of people are, rightfully so hesitant to, try something. You're comfortable with what you know about your disease, right? And there is a comfort in that. Um, your daughter said no because of the chemo. That's fair. That's probably one of the reasons why I would say no too. But as Dr. Q said, there is options, or there's innovation happening as we speak, where they're looking at antibodies instead of chemotherapy, and they're
Right.
looking for safer ways to make room within your bone marrow for the new bone marrow, or for the good stuff. So
Yeah, they just have to sort of paralyze your immune system until you have engraftment. So that's
yeah,
that's the big deal. But things are like, everything in medicine, things change quicker sometimes than you think they are.
yeah.
And
Um,
gene therapy is, they just approved it for children with sickle cell down to the
yes,
age of 2 years.
yeah.
So, I mean, the people who do this, they know what they know, but it just seems to me it'd be really difficult to do the collection and all the stuff you have to do in a 2-year-old. They're not because they're just small. So collecting and the chemo and all that stuff is a little bit more complicated, I think. You'd have
I
to
just want
ask.
to quickly answer this question. It says, does your insurance pay for gene therapy? Or do you need a GoFundMe? Also,
Um,
also who meets your criteria? There are programs. To my knowledge, nobody that's undergone commercial gene therapy has paid out of pocket
yeah.
as of
And,
right
and
now.
and in the United States, Medicare has a really kind of an unusual way they pay for it. They will pay for it if it works. So there's a possibility that you set it up, Medi-Cal or Medicare agrees to pay for it, but then for some reason the cells don't engraft or something, who knows what. That'd be very, very unusual. But then they wouldn't pay for it. So you'd have to get uh, someone who would agree, who it's probably, I haven't read a report where it didn't work. It's probably happened, but I've never read a report about that. But that's the way the state insurance in California works. So it's kind of an unusual. I've never heard of that before. Like, we'll pay for hydroxyurea if it doesn't work, we're not going to pay for it. That'd be kind of weird.
Um, let's see here. So the next question that I have is I have SC. And when you say SC, I don't know if you mean sickle cell or SC disease, and 33 and want to have children. Can you please share any tips?
Well, if you have well, it depends on whether you're a male or female, but you know, and if this is a woman, basically you have to have a good OBGYN. You should really um, make sure that you're in good shape to do that and have a lot of support for pregnancy in for women who have sickle cell disease is high risk because a lot of things happen to you during pregnancy. Your body really changes a lot. So that needs to be figured out. And like I was saying, if you were told me you were 42, then you would have to figure out, and you would know this because you wouldn't be having your period, but have you gone into menopause or something like that. But otherwise, for women, there's no, in this escort trial, women uh, didn't seem to have any issues with pregnancy.
There's a follow-up question about the criteria. What is the criteria to become a candidate? And I guess it says for gene therapy and maybe bone marrow transplant.
Yeah, the criteria is sort of like your ability to survive the the
That
therapy
procedure.
itself. So in bone marrow transplant, they have reduced conditioning, the chemotherapy for conditioning for people who are older, have complications of their sickle cell disease. So I'm not aware that in gene therapy they have um, if you have a lot of problems and they're worried that you wouldn't make it through the procedure. I don't exactly know the details behind that, but there's there is there now that now that they'll pay for 2-year-olds, there doesn't seem to be any criteria beyond if you have a lot of complications and I think we just talked to someone who was 30 that had a gene therapy.
Mm,
So
yeah.
definitely if you're healthy, then relatively healthy in your 30s or maybe 40s, you could get gene therapy.
Yeah, I think it would be more so you wouldn't qualify if you already have a lot of health issues, a lot of severe health issues going on, because then the risk becomes higher for you to
Right.
undergo a procedure like that. So technically, it kind of sounds counterintuitive, right? Because you'd want the worst, the people who have the most severe disease to have access to gene therapy or bone marrow transplant. But in reality, it's those who have a body that can undergo the rigor of that process or of that procedure. And it's like taking, I think I heard it's like a year out of your life, right? Between like hospitalization from start to end, right? So it's a major commitment. And then on top of that, your body has to be durable enough to withstand the procedure. So it'd be, if you think of it, it would be more like people who have maybe severe sickle cell disease would not necessarily be a candidate for some of these therapies just because it's too risky. You don't want to risk um, more harm to your body or more damage to your body.
Also, people who are iron overloaded. So if you're on chronic transfusions for some reason, you really have to be sure you take that chelator every single day because iron overload impairs your ability to withstand and uh, have a successful bone marrow transplant, gene therapy, whatever. Iron really damages your body. So people who are on chronic transfusions, you need to be checking your iron, or your physician needs to, and get you started on uh, a iron chelator so that you don't have iron overload. Iron overload might actually be a contraindication in some cases for a bone marrow transplant or gene therapy.
Don't you have to freeze your eggs to get gene therapy because reproduction wouldn't be possible anymore due to chemotherapy?
Yes.
So, it depends on where you are in life, right? And if you're done having kids, then that's not a problem. But if you are considering having kids, then that's something to very much seriously consider. Um, yeah.
And bias and discrimination in medicine, everybody who's around a reproductive age who goes through chemotherapy for cancer, insurance will pay for preserving your fertility, collecting sperm or eggs or whatever. But that's not the case for sickle cell disease, undergoing a bone transplant or gene therapy. So you have to be sure or make arrangements for that to happen before you before you enter into this. Make sure that your state or wherever your insurance will cover that. For women, it's a big deal. There's procedures involved, and so that's an issue for women more than for men. And then you have to preserve it, which is expensive. They put it in like liquid nitrogen, and then it's preserved, and that's not cheap either. If you're doing, like, say, for instance, you're personally doing it because you want to you want to have a kid in the future, but not right now. That's really expensive to have it collected and then have it preserved. There's a fee for that that's very can be high.
I like that question. Am I disconnected if I've never wanted a procedure to rid me of my sickle cell? 35 years old here. If you're disconnected, then I am too. So let's just say it like that. So, in my opinion, no, you are not disconnected. It really is a balance of outweighing benefits and risks, right? And you have to really sit with yourself and ask yourself, how much does sickle cell impact my daily life? Like if it is like everywhere you go, everything you do, you have to think about sickle cell, then it really greatly does. But for me, sickle cell maybe comes up once in my head and I'm living the rest of my life. So it doesn't interfere with my life as much. And so therefore, why would I undergo gene therapy if I feel it doesn't I'm not in the hospital, I'm not dealing with pain. I do deal with fatigue a lot, right? But it's like fatigue or gene therapy. And listen, you might catch me tomorrow saying something different because my mind changes. I might say, you know what, I'm done with this and I'm ready to get cured or I'm ready to get the gene therapy. But um, I think it's important to have that back and forth, and you're definitely not disconnected. There's a lot of people within the community who just don't see gene therapy or bone marrow transplant as an option for them. They'd rather manage it for from day to day. And, of course, there's hydroxyurea and there's other emerging therapies in which you can manage it from day to day alongside lifestyle, nutrition, exercise, all of that stuff. So you're not disconnected at all. It really is such an individualized choice. And you just really have to really sit with yourself and see how much is sickle cell impacting my life. Now, I probably would be saying something different if I was in the hospital on a monthly basis and I was in pain all the time, then I would probably be like, yeah, I would like to consider gene therapy or bone marrow or stem cell transplant. But for me right now, in this moment, there isn't a need.
And a lot of older people, and I don't know what the criteria for that is. When they have gene therapy or bone marrow transplant, they lose their identity as a person who has sickle cell disease. And that is really, for some people, that's really traumatic. They
Yeah,
sort of like their whole life, they've had this image of themselves and where they fit in, and then all of a sudden it's gone. You can't tell anybody you have sickle cell anymore because you don't. And it's a big identity. Like, am I still part of the sickle cell community? I'm the same person, but does this make me like totally different? It's a psychological change that can be difficult.
is it?
So that's something that to think about if you are undergoing a transplant or gene therapy to kind of, do something to think about that because it will happen. You won't be part of you don't feel like you're part of the sickle cell community, even though my opinion would be you still are because you had sickle cell and you're still part of that community. But I don't have sickle cell, so I can't really speak to that.
No, you're definitely still part of the community.
Yeah,
I'm getting,
somebody just wrote, I had a bone marrow transplant 3 years ago, and I struggle with my identity. I struggled with
yeah,
my identity for a while after that.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I hear, I've heard that relationships change, because sometimes people in your life, they're in your life as a caregiver and not as anything else, right? And so when you are cured or when you are free from, all the sickle cell, what are they to you now that you don't need a caregiver? And that could be an opportunity as well to have different relationships with people. But yeah, it's very, very um, intricate and nuanced and complex, the whole identity thing, who you are to yourself, who you are to other people, who, what other people think of you now that you are cured. So there's just so many dynamics at play. It's very, very interesting. Oh, I see a lot of great questions. I do see a lot of questions about, and we touched on this a little bit earlier about men's reproductive health. And some of the questions were, um, can men still have healthy kids with sickle cell? And does sickle cell cause issues for men having kids? Never explored this topic before. Um, I
Yeah,
can give a sh
go ahead.
I was just say that the short answer is, you can still have healthy kids if you're a man with sickle cell. That's the short answer, and Dr. Q can kind of explain.
Yeah, I think, you have to know the status of your partner. either way. So if you both have sickle cell disease, there's a possibility your child could have sickle cell disease. If you marry or you have children with someone who doesn't have sickle cell disease or sickle cell trait, then your kids will have sickle cell trait. If you have somebody with sickle cell disease trait and you have disease, then there's a chance that your child could have sickle cell disease. And if you both have sickle cell disease, then your children will have sickle cell disease. So that's something to think about um, when you're going into this. So otherwise, I think having sickle cell disease and having children can be a challenge because you still have sickle cell disease and there's issues with that. You're sick sometimes. You can't like especially like if say you're a single mom, there's times you can't take care of your kids because you're too sick.
So, essentially, you can have, there's no problems with having kids. It really is at the end of the day, you kind of just reflecting on what happens, just different scenarios that can pop up with sickle cell and being a parent. And that's something that I um, think about a lot too. Just, having my daughter. What happens when I fall sick? Do I let her visit me in the hospital? Do I not? How do I communicate? How do I teach her about sickle cell? Right now, she's super, super sensitive to a lot of that stuff. And so, how do I explain it in a way? And then, of course, fatigue comes in, you're tired and you can't do some of the activities with your kids. And so, thinking along the lines of that and just all the scenarios that that you might encounter being a parent with sickle cell. But otherwise, there isn't an issue with having healthy kids if you're a man or a woman with sickle cell. So it's more so the capacity that you'll show up as a parent.
And I think, if you're planning on that, you should really talk to your primary care physician, maybe even a genetic counselor, um, other people who have sickle cell disease, who have children. It's a lifelong commitment to have kids. Just they're cute when they're little, but they all grow up and they and you're still responsible for them.
And they're no
So
longer cute. No.
yeah, they can be pretty cute, but but they talk
Yeah,
when they get older, they talk back more.
they sure do. I have my daughter, just some of the stuff she be coming out of her mouth. I'm like, am I too nice of a parent? Like, how did these words form in your head for you to fix your mouth to say what you just said? Like, anyway,
So I just saw a question, is gene therapy, and I don't couldn't remember if they talking about also bone marrow transplant. Is that like a forever? Does that last forever? Well,
it's
for
supposed
gene
to.
therapy, the I personally think, and I could be wrong, but I personally think, and I think most people who are transplanters hope that gene therapy lasts forever. So you actually put your cells that have been transformed to in some way to increase fetal hemoglobin or a different kind of hemoglobin. And it's assumed that those cells are going to keep reproducing in your bone marrow and that they're not going to disappear or revert back to sickle cell progenitor cells. So in that sense, it should last for your lifetime. But whether, like, particularly gene therapy, whether it does, it's going to take time, like maybe 10 years from now, 15 some years from now, where people who had gene therapy are still fine and they don't have sickle cell anymore. With bone marrow transplant, there are people who have, were transplanted 20 plus years ago and they're doing okay. Um, and again, I rely on the literature to inform me about this kind of thing, and I don't for definitely for gene therapy, if there's engraftment and everything works fine and you're discharged in your home, that's for as far as we know, for life. And for bone marrow transplant as well, although there can be issues if you get like really sick or something like that, that could change things. But it's exceedingly rare for anything to go wrong with the bone marrow transplant once you're engrafted and you're out out of the woods.
I'm catching up to you guys' questions. I see one here while we're on the topic. This person is from Canada. They're not sure if it's different within the US, but they were denied gene therapy because they don't have severe sickle cell disease. And they're trying to understand the exact criteria they look for. Are there differences between states or between countries and eligibilities, or is that determined by the manufacturer or both?
Yeah, and the difference between Canada and the United States is the United States has a very patchwork kind of weird healthcare system that's partially government, partially private. It's kind of a quilt of different ways to get insurance. Whereas in Canada, they have national health insurance. So here you can, on some kind of level, you could probably shop around to figure out who's going to pay for that. And in most cases, everybody will. In Canada, they may say that the health insurance for Canada um, may have criteria for um, transplant, but and that would be different from the United States. And in Europe, I don't know what, Europe has health, the same kind of health care as Canada, and I don't know, I've never heard that someone says I'm too healthy to get cured of sickle cell disease, or not cured, but to get
Yeah, I
gene
never heard of that
transplant
either.
or a transplant. So um, there are criteria more for your two, like we were saying, that you have too many complications. You're a high risk to get chemotherapy, go through a transplant. That would be more an issue in this country. Not that you're too healthy to get a transplant. You still have sickle cell,
Yeah,
and it's unpredictable. You could be healthy today and not so healthy a year from now.
you should probably ask, why you were denied and, ask them to provide the reasoning behind that. And
Yeah,
maybe that's something we can discuss, or that's
yeah,
something you could send into us at ask
yeah.
at sc101.org, and we can take a deeper dive into that. The success rate, what is the success rate of these procedures? Is it 100% cure, or is there a chance that it comes back? With gene therapy, because it's so new, we don't know. And that's one of the questions is how durable are these therapies? With bone marrow transplant, I think we've been doing that since the 80s, right? And not once has sickle cell returned, or has that reverted. If I'm correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Q. Um, Success rate for bone marrow transplant or stem cell transplant?
The success there's so many different kinds of transplant. There's different types
Yeah.
of conditioning. Um, there's graft versus host disease. There's definitely been people who had a transplant, the transplant failed, and they had to get a transplant from a different person. So within a short period of time, they had two transplants. The issue with the transplant is once you're engrafted and you're out and your body has accepted the transplant, is there an issue, say 10 years from now, that all of a sudden you could reject that transplant? I don't think I wouldn't say it's impossible, but I would say that it's exceedingly rare. I would have to go to PubMed and look it up because I'm not a transplanter, so I don't know what the risk of having that happen is, but I think it's low. Once you're engrafted and you're doing okay, like a year down the road or something like that. But right after a transplant, so you haven't completely engrafted, you could reject that transplant and in some cases, you would have to have another transplant, especially if it happened and your sickle cell progenitor cells couldn't reconstitute your bone marrow. So there's two kind of things. So you could get a transplant. Your immune system uh, doesn't allow that transplant to engraft, and then you come back and you have sickle cell again. Or for whatever reason, it doesn't engraft, but you don't have enough stem cells or progenitor cells to reconstitute your bone marrow. And in that case, you would need a second bone marrow transplant in order to survive uh, the transplant experience. Those are rare events, but they do happen. But once you're engrafted, it, barring some kind of really unusual thing, um, say you're out a year or something like that, it'd be unusual, I think, to reject a stem cell transplant. And we don't know about gene therapy.
Yeah. And then I will also say there's never like 100% in medicine, or nothing is ever like sure. I don't think we would ever get like 100%, or would we? I don't know, Dr.
Yeah,
Q. You tell me.
yeah. I don't think so. Nothing's 100% medicine. Crazy thing. I mean, yeah.
Okay. The next question I see here, what's the main difference between Lyfgenia and Casgevy?
Well, Casgevy is it it increases your fetal hemoglobin. So that gene therapy increases your fetal hemoglobin to levels like over 20%, 30%, and having high levels of fetal hemoglobin really eliminate the side effect or the sickle cell disease. Um, and that was kind of people who have sickle cell disease and hereditary persistence of fetal hemoglobin, their fetal hemoglobin could be over 30%. They don't have any symptoms of sickle cell disease. The other therapy, they actually they changed your progenitor cells so they start making a different kind of hemoglobin. It's not hemoglobin A like I have. It's a different kind of hemoglobin that's like hemoglobin A. It's just a different kind. And it actually has been modified so that it inhibits sickling. So if there were sickle cell disease after the therapy, they wouldn't be able to sickle. So it's a modified hemoglobin that's just like hemoglobin A, uh, that your bone marrow, the new cells in your bone marrow start making. And in both cases, you don't have sickle cell being made in your bone marrow. You either have cells that make high levels of fetal hemoglobin, or you have cells that make a modified hemoglobin that is like hemoglobin A.
Okay. Um, I don't know where to take this. So there's a question here. It says they freeze their sperm right before the gene therapy.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. And then I got another, I'm not sure, Namaste Nay. We talked a little bit about what a good candidate looks like. She said, what would make a good candidate for any of the quote unquote cures? People keep asking me why I haven't gotten cured yet, and I don't know what to tell them.
Uh, what the Well, I mean, it sort of depends on like the person from Canada who's got denied, which that's why you never got it. Or you're like a lot of people who, they don't have a lot of complications with their sickle cell disease, or they just don't want to take a chance that something bad could happen while you were getting a therapy like that. I mean, I think people with sickle.
There's risks
Yeah, there's
involved.
risk. And people with Cassandra can tell you, but from my
Yeah,
perspective, when you go to the hospital, it's because bad things are happening to you. And so the hospital is not like your favorite place to be. And if you're going to get one of these therapies, you're going to be attached to that hospital for like a year or 6 months, something. It's a big
yeah, it's a
deal.
year out of your
And you
life.
may just think, I don't want to go through that. That's like too much for me. I'm not that, I don't feel, I feel like I can cope with this. And I don't want to take a year off of my life to have something that has risks and whatever. And that's your personal choice. That's just and
Yeah,
you
I'm
might
kind
change your mind in a year. You might say, well, actually, it doesn't seem like that's that bad, and I'll try to have this therapy.
I'm kind of sad people ask you that question because to me, how rude. How rude that you ask why haven't you gotten cured yet?
That's true. That's
Do
but
you want to,
I mean
first of all, would you like to pay the $2, $3 million? No, I'm just playing.
I mean there's sort of like this there's a social thing like you don't ask really personal questions to people, and to me that's like a really you're in my space,
Yeah.
you know shut up.
Yeah, that's not a fair question because it
No,
is such a big procedure. It's
it
life
is.
changing. It's not like you going in and getting like a blood draw or a shot or something. This
Yeah.
is a big, it's a year-long commitment. There's risks involved. It involves chemotherapy. Um, it involves eligibility. You have to see if you're eligible or not, if you're a good candidate or not. So there's a lot of reasons why you can tell them why, but you can also tell them none of your business or go, you feel free to go look at the procedure, look that up for yourself, and maybe you can come deduce the answer to that your question, you know? That's rude, but oh well. Um, yeah.
You could
For
also
some
just
reason
say,
that one triggered me a little bit.
you could also say, I'm just waiting for something that's a little bit easier than what they're doing right
Yeah, or
now.
less riskier.
And
They're
it's
still they're
less
still
risk.
doing stuff. Yeah, they're
I
still
mean, people's perceptions of risk really is different, you know. I
mm,
mean, some people do very risky things. They do mountain climbing, they do, stuff that they jump out of an airplane with a parachute on. I don't think I'd do that.
yeah.
But I mean, risk is a personal thing. And that's why when if you agree to do a bone marrow transplant, gene therapy, there's a consent involved. And the consent tells you all the different the procedure itself and then the problems that could happen after the procedure, and some are common and some are very rare. And so when you go through that consent, you have to really ask questions and be sure that you want to do whatever,
Yeah.
transplant or gene therapy, because once you get the conditioning, you can't say no at that point.
Yeah, there's no turning back.
You're going, you're on the train and you can't get off. So you really have to, before you go into something that's life-changing and takes a long time, you really have to be prepared for that mentally, that you're going to as the other thing is if you're doing this for your child, that's I think harder because you're
Yeah,
making a decision for a child and they're at risk just like you would be if you said yes. The difference is that your child doesn't really know what's going to happen to them and they're looking at you like, is this okay, mom? So that's
that's a
a
tough
harder
one.
decision.
But I have noticed more caregivers would are interested in, providing their child with the cure, and then you'll see like a lot more people with sickle cell are not interested in the cure. So like there is that like, certain certain demographics within the community have a higher interest in the cure, and usually those are caregivers. Whereas, you get a mixed bag with people with sickle cell, where some people are like, no, I'm good off of that, and then some people are willing to go through with it.
And the thing with children is they're the best candidates because they don't have, if they're young enough, they don't really have chronic changes from sickle cell disease. So if you're, say, 3 to 5 years old or something like that, and you get a bone marrow transplant, it lasts for life, you know, 99% of your life, you don't have sickle cell disease. So that's a big change versus, I'm 40 or something, and I've had all this going on with me, and now I'm going to be cured. So it's transplanters like feel better if they do. They don't think they feel better, but they realize that if they do a transplant on a child, that person is free of sickle cell disease for the rest of their life. It's a different kind of take on it.
I'll also say the media contributes to people asking those types of questions too, because every so once in a while, right? We've had gene therapy approved for sickle cell since 2019, I want to say
Yeah.
December 2019. But you all of a sudden you see like just every year, or every few months, you see these stories pop up that go viral. Cured sickle cell, this person, blah, 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 this and that, as if it's brand new. There's been people who have been undergoing it, but then the media portrays it as a cure. But if you ask people within the community, if you ask researchers and physicians in the community, they wouldn't label it as a cure. And so people see these headlines, they're like, oh, so and so cured of sickle cell and this and that. And then they come to you and ask you, oh, why haven't you done this? Or why, this person did this and what's going on? And they don't have the full story. They don't understand insurance. They don't understand conditioning. They don't understand that it's not even the cure. They don't understand so many things. And the media just kind of writes a headline as clickbait and ends up biting us in the butt because we have to explain, oh, this is actually really not what it is. We actually don't consider this a cure. Actually, this is a big risk. They don't even discuss any of that stuff within the article. They're just there for the story. And the stories are great, and I'm happy for those individuals, but then I think sometimes they're misrepresented, and that ends up coming back to us. So um, I would just encourage those people to do a little bit more research on their end, to understand a little bit better. Um, Last month, I had a crisis. It was so intense that none of the drugs worked. I was later administered morphine, which took too long for about 2 hours for improvement to be noticed. I don't understand why. So, is there a reason why somebody may not respond to um, opiates when they have a crisis?
Well, it's usually a dose kind of thing. So, and the type of opiate, but none of these medications work right away. So I would say that, I had morphine once in my life because I had kidney stones. But it's not instantaneous unless you've gone to this hospital and usually you get in there, they give you your morphine, and then within 30 minutes or an hour, if you start feeling better, you have to ask what the dose was. And if you're in an emergency room, the dose could depend on the doctor who's writing the orders. So if a doctor looked in your records and said, "Oh, this person gets a kind of high dose of morphine, but that's what works, so I'm going to order that." Or they look at it and they go like, "Whoa, that's way too high a dose. I'd never give anybody a dose of morphine that high. I'm going to give them half of that." So they don't necessarily tell you, "Oh, I'm just giving you X milligrams of morphine." So um, that could be one reason why the morphine didn't work. The dose was lower, even by a little bit, and it's pretty common. People will go in and say, "I usually get 3 milligrams of Dilaudid," and the doctor says, "No way, I'm not going to give you that. I'll kill you if I give you that." And they give you one, and then it doesn't work. I mean, that's if you
That's
go
the
into,
under
yeah,
treatment of pain.
it's really, it's not. It depends on where you are. If they don't know much about sickle cell, it's likely that you would be undertreated. They also don't like to be told, "Hey, I need 3 milligrams of Dilaudid." They're like, "Wait, how do you know that?" Anyway, it's
So does it sound like it's under treatment of pain or like they're giving too low of doses,
yeah.
maybe?
And they also, I don't know. I think if you're not familiar with sickle cell disease, you're not familiar with the person who's in front of you. I think doctors err on the side of, do no harm. If they think that's too high a dose, then personally they just they do what they feel comfortable doing. And if you know the person and you've you know what they get, or you can look in the chart and it says, "Oh, look, this person gets this dose of morphine every time they come into the ED," that
Yeah.
makes it a little easier. Um, but doctors, yeah, it's an issue if you go like to an ED where they don't know sickle cell, you've never been there before, that could be a real problem.
You better go into the hospital. You know who I'm talking to? Sam. I have acute chest syndrome right now and I don't want to go to the hospital because I have to pay bills and will miss work. Don't play with your life like that.
Yeah, acute chest syndrome, pneumonia, whatever, that's life-threatening.
That's
You,
yeah,
you, that's really, and the thing is, it could happen really fast. So you could, and you could be in a situation where you can't get to the hospital fast enough. But respiratory disease, respiratory problems, pain, fever, those kinds of things need to be treated. They're life-threatening.
yeah, don't wait on that. Yeah, because acute chest syndrome is probably what the I read somewhere that that's the top killer of adults with sickle
Yeah,
cell. So don't mess with acute chest.
yeah. And you need to get, you need, unless you have a X-ray machine at home, you don't really know what's going on. So you need to be evaluated, and missing a couple days of work or whatever is a lot better than missing a lot of work. It's not, it generally doesn't, takes a while for it to resolve. And depending, you may need a blood transfusion. Who knows?
Yeah, yeah. Don't play. I better hear that you've gone in. And you know what we're gonna have to, you should find there's a lot of organizations, nonprofit organizations that do provide assistance with bills and all of that. I don't know where you're located, but there are resources out there for people. So don't let the idea of bills stop you from getting healthcare and playing with your life in that way because Q-Chest is nothing to be playing with at all. I have apheresis treatments once a month, and I'm noticing I'm admitting to the hospital once a month when my period is happening. Could my monthly cycle cause pain crisis? Yes, there's a correlation.
Yeah.
Uh, I think it's still being studied. I think there's like, emerging research around having your cycles and sickle cell, but there is definitely a correlation between the two. Any suggestions for this person, Dr.
Well,
Q?
I think, if you're having exchange transfusions, you need to talk to whoever's uh, administering them, the doctor, whoever orders. When you have an exchange, they calculate what your hemoglobin S is going to be at the end of the procedure. And if you're still having problems, then they have to do something changing your schedule or having you leave with a lower hemoglobin S, or something like that. It's because you're on exchange, you can't do this if you're getting a simple transfusion, but with an exchange, you can figure out, oh, the S at the end of this is going to be 10% or 15 or 5. Um, so it's something that can be worked on with your physician, trying to figure out what's a good way for you not to have pain once a month, even though it's kind of defeats, depending on why you're getting the transfusion. If it's for pain, it kind of defeats the purpose of getting that transfusion in a way.
We got a lot of gene therapy questions. Is it true if you do gene therapy and it doesn't work, you can go back and try traditional bone marrow transplant? But if you do bone marrow transplant first and it doesn't take, you can't do gene therapy anymore?
I don't, I don't,
Yeah, I've
I
never
don't
heard
think
of
so. I
that.
don't think there's a contraindication to either one. But And I think it would be an unusual situation. So I think that's kind of a hypothetical thing, whether you would qualify. There's so much that would be involved with that. Um, it's kind of a difficult question to look at. I don't think it would completely eliminate you from either one, but there'd be a lot of reasons why they didn't work, etc. Someone says contact Cayenne Wellness if you're in California. Yeah, Cayenne Wellness has free mental health. They help people a lot in the state. And they're down in the Los Angeles area, but it's
The only time I get sick a lot is during pregnancy and when I travel on flights. Reason why I'm considering it, but my doctor seems to think otherwise. Wondering if it's just the doctors. I'm wondering, Keisha, are you saying you're considering gene therapy? I'll pin your question here. Only time I get sick is during pregnancy and when I travel on flights. Reason why I'm considering it, but my doctor seems to think otherwise. Wondering if it's just the doctors. Give me one second. Let us know what you're considering.
yeah.
Uh, let's see. I don't know if there are have been any success stories for gene therapies in Colorado. Have you heard of anything in particular in Colorado? If
No.
you're living in Colorado with sickle cell, that you're a beast of your own because the high altitude. I know a family that moved away from Colorado because of the high altitude. And it was impacting the sickle. Actually, I think they were born there, so it didn't impact them as much. But now that they've moved, they cannot go back there because then it impacts them. But I haven't heard anything specifically from Colorado.
Yeah, it depends. Yeah, it depends. But it is depending on where you live in Colorado, you could be a mile high. If you're
I
in
thought all of Colorado is a mile high. Is it not?
Denver is a mile high, but I'm not sure every it's maybe the whole I know, but all I know for sure is Denver is a mile high, which um there that's the oxygen pressure at that high, at a mile is different than at sea level. It's also very cold in the winter.
Okay, Keisha, I see here. So she's considering gene therapy, but her doctor is denying her gene therapy. What do you do in that situation if your doctor's saying
You
no,
get a
but that's
second
something?
opinion. You go, you either ask your doctor for a second opinion or you ask uh, a social worker, your friend, somebody in the medical community where you are. Uh, is there another? I want to change my primary care to somebody else. So, I mean, that, yeah. I don't know that personally that I would deny somebody if they wanted to do it. I mean,
Yeah.
if they meet the criteria and they're willing to give up a year of this period of life and take the chance on any bone marrow, and they seem in a way the person who's going to benefit is going to be a person who doesn't have any big complications because that means after the therapy they won't. But if you go in, I think I saw if you go in and you've got AVN or you've got some kind of renal disease or whatever, that's probably going to, the AVN's not going to change, and the other chronic problems will maybe improve a little bit, but they're not going to be cured by having a transplant or gene therapy. They'll stabilize. Some respiratory problems do get better after gene therapy for sure.
If you have iron overload and you're taking a chelation, taking a chelator, but it seems like the medicine isn't taking the iron out fast enough, is there something else that can be done to get the iron out faster? That's a good question.
It's a dose and frequency kind of thing. So I can recall that people were on an oral iron chelator and they also got desferal as an IV iron chelator. Um,
Mm.
I'm not sure that, I mean, that's just getting more chelators. Um, I think that the issue with it is that you have to be very consistent. And I think that depending on what they're using to measure the whether it's working or not, for instance, if they're getting a ferritin, maybe you need an MRI to look at your heart and your liver to see if that's getting better. That's more accurate. Um, a ferritin is what's called an acute phase reaction that goes up and down depending on inflammation. So that kind of gives you a trend, but it's not very accurate. And there are more accurate ways to measure your iron to see whether it's going down. If it's not, then your dose of medication needs to be adjusted. And it may, if you have really high iron, it may, because it's so high, it may just take a long time for that medicine to start, getting enough iron out so that there's a dramatic change. Don't give up on it, though.
You guys got a lot of great questions. All right, I'm like over here. So, yeah, but you seem to want to be talking about gene therapy and bone marrow transplant. So the next one is here in Saudi Arabia, there are many who have done marrow transplantation more than gene therapy. Which one is better? And I can guess the reason why you all are doing bone marrow transplant more is because bone marrow transplant for sickle cell has been around for a lot longer. It first cured the first person with sickle cell back in the 1980s. So it has a lot of uh, history and longevity to understanding bone marrow transplant and sickle cell, whereas gene therapy does not. But is there anything, which one is better, Dr. Q, would you say?
That's a good question.
Yeah,
I mean, I think
it
that
depends, right?
there's different kinds of bone marrow transplants. There are different kinds of conditioning. There's different kinds of treatment for graft versus host disease. Um, uh, and so that that's kind of a very in a very heterogeneous kind of thing. There's different ways to do that, and the outcomes are different. But if you had to choose one, I think gene therapy is the simplest. It has the least amount of chemo. You're also getting your own cells back, so you don't have to worry about graft versus host disease. And it you're getting your own cells that that either produce a lot of fetal hemoglobin or a hemoglobin that will protect you from sickle cell disease. So gene therapy is probably, if you had a choice and somebody said, do you want this or do you want this? I would choose gene therapy. The difference is, as we were saying, we don't know about gene therapy's ability to its longevity. Is it going to be just as good 20 years from now as it was, 2 years? Whereas with transplant, there are people who are 20 years out from a transplant and they're doing fine. But there are other people, like we were saying, that reject their transplant early or even later, and have to get another transplant. There's just not enough information about gene therapy to know its durability. I mean, if you wanted to be a pessimist, you'd say, well, maybe in 20 years it's just going to not work anymore. I don't think that's likely, but nobody knows. And it's the gene therapy is a much the chemotherapy involved and it's less invasive. The other thing is if you're going to get a transplant, you have to find a match. The best one would be a full sibling, then there's either HLA matched on related donors, or you can get a haplo-matched related donor. So there's different ways to do gene transplant. And,
Yeah, oh,
and
go
your
ahead.
your your health depends a lot on how you respond to a transplant. If you're really healthy, you're going to do okay. But if you have a lot of complications, they may have to modify the chemotherapy, and um, it's a little more more, it still works, but it's a little more difficult. And yeah, the other thing is with all this, not so much with gene therapy, with transplant, you want to go to a center where they've done a lot of transplants for sickle cell disease because it's different from a transplant for cancer. So if you don't want to be the first person in some hospital that's ever gotten a transplant for sickle cell disease, you might do okay, but you'd be much better off if you went somewhere where they routinely give transplants to people with sickle cell disease. And that's kind of their thing, is to do sickle cell transplants. There's a lot involved in a transplant. It's much more risky than gene therapy for a lot of different reasons.
So there's a whole bunch, there's different types of bone marrow transplant or transplants, and then there's different types of gene therapies. So it's complex as well, right? Like there's a gene therapy that may work one way and another gene therapy that may work another way and have a different target to alleviate symptoms of sickle cell. So you kind of just have to know the space and understand that it's not necessarily gene therapy versus bone marrow transplant because there's just so many different types. It's like maybe one you can consider one type of gene therapy and consider against this type of bone marrow transplant and just there's subcategories to all of this. And so but generally speaking, transplant has been studied longer, so there's a lot more known about transplant, and there's a lot more that the side effects are better known, right? And then when it comes to therapy, because you're using your own cells, you don't have that risk for graft versus host, which is a risk that you have with bone marrow transplant. So you kind of just got to weigh it out, but then also look into each type of whatever you're looking at. Um, Personally, for me, gene therapy is something that would be more attractive to me. Now that's personal. And that's because it does use my own cells and you know that it eliminates that risk of graft versus host. But if you have a sibling match and you have 100% sibling match, that yields very, very high success rate. And so, you know, we already know that yields a high success rate and it's been studied a longer time. And so maybe that looks better to you, right? So it also depends on your circumstances as well. If you're like me and you don't have a full sibling, then, you know, gene therapy is a little bit more attractive to me. So it really just depends on what your situation is, what, you know, if you have full match sibling or not, what your age is, just a whole bunch of stuff to think about. I have, we're almost at time. Yeah, we're pretty much at time. Just quickly, could getting an IV for hydration before going to a high altitude environment prevent crisis?
Uh, a blood transfusion would help.
I was gonna say a
Uh,
transfusion.
and it depending on where you're going and how long you're going to be in the plane and all that kind of stuff makes a difference. But and what your hemoglobin is. So if you run a hemoglobin of 8, say, um, routinely, then a blood transfusion would be what what would be the most effective. But if you can't get a transfusion because you have antibodies or something like that, then uh, hydration wouldn't, IV hydration wouldn't be any different than drinking a lot of water for 2 days before you just went on the plane and drinking a lot of water while you were on. it's you're at about 10,000 feet when you're in an airplane. Oh, also having an oxygen. If you have you can take oxygen onto the airplane, and hydrate a lot if you, for some reason, didn't get a transfusion. But the person that is the most expert in this is my buddy Cassandra, who does a lot of traveling. She just told me she's going to go to India, which I've done that a
I
couple
want
of
to.
times.
There's a conference. I haven't decided quite
It's a
yet because
law.
that's a long flight.
It's like 14 hours plus to get there.
I would definitely need to bring somebody with me. That's too long of a flight to fly alone. Um, does getting apheresis help with iron overload?
It does actually. It depends on how on the operator how they're looking at it. So um, for one thing, you're taking iron out and you're putting an equivalent amount of iron back in. So the net gain is not really zero, but it's like say zero. Um, and if you come in with a high enough hemoglobin, and say your iron overloaded, if you come in with a high enough hemoglobin and instead of making your hemoglobin 10 when you leave, the pheresis doctor leaves it at, just figures, okay, 9 is pretty good for sickle cell. We'll just leave it at 9, even though you came in at 10. Then every time you get a pheresis, you're actually getting a phlebotomy. You're getting less, you're getting rid of iron with every transfusion. And I definitely had a few patients who were not severely iron overloaded, but were iron overloaded and on exchange transfusion, they their iron level went to normal. And some of those people, what we were doing it during the TCD or the stop study. So some of those people, after the stop study was over, they just continued on exchange transfusion, sort of. I'm thinking of one person sort of indefinitely. So they effectively didn't have sickle cell disease because they were always, every month they got an exchange transfusion and they never had any problems. So after that,
Yeah.
and a couple people, you know, got sort of their iron level, their ferritin went down so low that they were no longer um, iron overloaded. That was a little harder to do. And you have to be satisfied that leaving with a lower hemoglobin is okay. Some people don't think that's okay, so they wouldn't do that.
All right, guys. We are at the point to wrap up, but such great questions today, guys. I'm really there are some questions that we get usually, but you guys dived in deep with the gene therapy. Lots of great questions. So thank you so much for joining us today. And I hope you have a happy Friday. I'll let Dr. Q say his spiel and then we'll sign off.
Okay, so Sickle Cell 101 is for education. So everything that I tell you is for education only. I don't know your history. I'm just answering questions on their face value. Other people, uh, other sickle cell doctors may have a completely different uh, take on it than I do. Some of the, I'm not like, I'm using my personal experience and what I've read as the basis, and I could be wrong sometimes. So things that you hear from me, you need to talk to your personal care physician. I heard this, what do you think about it? And you should always trust your doctor who knows you the best for advice for you personally, because they know your complications, they know your history, and they know what's best for you. So this is for education only. I'm not trying to push any kind of therapy or medication or anything like that. This is just an educational experience for you. And thanks for coming in and
Yeah,
listening.
great combo. Will you be attending WarriorCon next week? I will be in the area, but I won't be able to attend WarriorCon. I'm only going to be in the area for a couple days, but maybe I will see you if you're going to be there. I'm flying down from the Bay Area to Los Angeles. So, if you guys are attending, there is WarriorCon in LA, hosted by the Sickle Cell Consortium, and I think Cayenne Wellness is also co-hosting. A great place for people with sickle cell community to get together and talk about important issues. So, um, keep an eye out for that. I think there are details on the Sickle Cell Consortium page. And yeah, see if you guys can go. It's always a great time. And what are we doing this weekend? We're drinking our water, we're getting rest. What else are we doing? And we're gonna buy ourselves a little treat because we deserve it. Can we agree to that? Can we agree to that? Okay. All right. You guys have a wonderful weekend ahead, and we will see you next time.
Bye-bye,
Happy Friday.
everybody. Thanks for
Take
tuning
care.
in.
All right. And let me stop live streaming on.